All right, good afternoon. My name is Major General Kim Colleton, and it is my pleasure and privilege to serve as the Deputy Commanding General for Military and International Operations for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and to facilitate today's panel on engineering innovations and thinking differently. So today, our team is going to share with you some of the amazing work that our professionals from the Engineering, Research, and Development Center and the Army's Geospatial Center are doing to help the Army and the Joint Force go further and faster in contested and distributed environments. What you've probably heard many times at this conference already on day one, and just now during the last panel, is that to maintain a military advantage over our adversaries, we must leverage better and exploit faster new technologies across all domains. In fact, preparing for multi-domain operations to provide decisive effects for the Joint Force is a key focus for the Army of 2030. We know that forward-positioned ground forces, those able to converge effects from land, air, sea, space, and cyberspace, can complicate our adversaries' decision-making, disrupt their actions, and assure our allies and partners. That's where the talented professionals of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers come in. This type of work is in our engineering DNA. From constructing the siege trenches of Yorktown, to mapping the western frontier, to building railroads and ports across Europe during World War I, to establishing new airstrips and supply depots across the Pacific during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Then, more than 3/4 of a century ago, our nation's military leaders turned to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to apply the latest technologies of the time to solving some of our nation's toughest challenges. Our Waterways Experiment Station in Vicksburg, Mississippi, in fact, helped plan the logistical portion of the invasion of Normandy. Our scientists and engineers advised military planners on the challenges that they would face with assuring coastal logistics. They built and tested models of the Mulberry Harbors proposed to support joint logistics over the shore at Normandy to help improve on the original design and the concept of employment. They helped design float bridges to assure mobility across Europe and developed design and material solutions to support the heavy wheel loads required by the new aircraft operating in the Pacific. And today, our innovations are providing modular protective systems for base camps, guard towers, and fighting positions to protect our soldiers from rocket and mortar attacks. By the way, this structural hardening technology is also being used at our embassies and other key facilities around the world. These advancements are being developed by some of the Army's leading minds in science and engineering at our labs and centers. Every day, our Engineering, Research, and Development Center professionals work with sustainment, planning, and operations communities to develop novel solutions to emerging problems. We're also working closely with Army Futures Command through events like Project Convergence, Capstone, and Focused Excursion to inform what the Army might look like in 2040. In fact, some of the technologies that you will hear and see showcased today were employed in the last 2 iterations of Project Convergence. In a moment, you'll hear about current efforts in the operational energy and advanced power space from Nick Josephik, one of our industrial engineers at the Construction Engineering Research and Development Laboratory. You'll also hear from Heather Spate, one of our hydrologists from the Army Geospatial Center. She'll share her efforts in AFRICOM and other combatant commands to inform their CON plans and O plans based on access to water and awareness of other operational environmental hazards. While Heather's efforts focus on our static posture locations, Dr. Martin Page will share his efforts to help reduce our liquid logistics tail for forces on the move. And then finally, you'll hear from Dr. Kate Brody from our Coastal Hydraulics Lab. Who'll share her efforts with the Littoral Zone Remote Sensing Group to improve maritime access and ship-to-shore operations. Their efforts, the efforts that we showcase here today, are only a sample of the expansive work our engineers and scientists are doing. But I want this to be more than just a show and tell. I'd like this to be a conversation. So at the end of today's presentation, we're going to leave time, so please bring on your questions. With that, I will now turn you over to Nick Josephik to start off with advancements in operational energy. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Nick Josephik with the Army Corps of Engineers Construction Engineering Research Laboratory, and I have the pleasure of representing just one small portion of the energy research that our laboratory and the Greater Erddig Laboratory is performing. So I'll be speaking on some fuel cell and hydrogen research. The Army Corps of Engineers is looking at fuel cells and hydrogen as an opportunity, as an alternative energy generation. Hydrogen can be used as an alternative energy storage medium, and we can use that both in stationary applications, mobile applications, back at the fixed installations, and out in the forward operating bases. So the first research project that I'll be speaking about is titled the H2 at Rescue. Now this is an emergency vehicle that is completely powered by a fuel cell. And one part of this research, because we're the Army Corps of Engineers, we can work with any federal agency, public or private, and corporations. And this is a great example of collaboration that we're allowed as the Army Corps of Engineers to do. Because with this one, we've been able to work with the Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, the Navy, other Army laboratories, the GVSC Army Laboratory, and also a private partner, Accelera by Cummins. So the uniqueness of all of us coming together strengthened this project by having multi-agency collaboration. So this is a fuel cell powered emergency vehicle that is powered by hydrogen, and it can pull into any emergency situation and immediately begin exporting power. So it can export 25 kilowatts worth of power, and what it does is it replaces having to pull in additional generators. The fuel cell, this vehicle can drive about 1,500 miles on a single tank of fuel and can immediately begin powering, just plugging in whatever items that you have. So we can reduce bringing in that generator. We don't have to have skilled technicians to set up generators. The vehicle becomes that generation equipment. Another nice aspect of this research, so this is just one platform that the vehicle, but this could be integrated into many different vehicle platforms of using power and then having that power export. Additionally, this fuel cell can produce some usable water, and in the back of that truck is a warming and cooling station to give that initial help during an emergency. Another research that we're looking at is generating hydrogen fuels in the field. So some of our researchers have developed the distributed low energy wastewater treatment system. So this is a wastewater treatment system that also is able to harvest two types of usable fuels. So we're able to harvest methane and hydrogen along with treating the water and having usable water. So the researchers are leading the way in looking at, instead of spending all that energy and time just to treat our wastewater, let's harvest that into usable fuels, increase our energy security, our resiliency, and reduce our logistical burdens of bringing fuel in the field. Next slide. Our laboratory in the Detroit area, the GVSC laboratory, is developing this HELP system. And this is a fuel cell powered system that is both tracked and or wheeled, and it can export power, but it also could deliver hydrogen to vehicles in the fuel. So again, another way to dispense hydrogen to create power in the field and just give us different opportunities for types of energy generation in the field. Our last system that we're going to look at is electrolyzer research. Again, We want to both use hydrogen in the field and we want to produce hydrogen as a potential alternate fuel. So there's lots of research being done in electrolyzer research, which making the production of hydrogen much more efficient. There's research on how to store that hydrogen and how to use that. So again, across our ERDC laboratories, we're looking at how do we generate fuels, how do we use those fuels, how can we produce power in the field, and create this system and this environment of having all alternative options where we can increase our energy resiliency and security. I'm going to pass this over to researcher Heather Spate to talk about some of her research.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Take it in for a minute. I'm actually pretty excited to talk about the work that I do. So again, my name is Heather Spate. I work for the Army Geospatial Center. I am the branch chief for the Water and Environmental Decision Support Branch, formerly known as the Water Resources Branch, if you're familiar with that. If you are not familiar with AGC, AGC collects, manages, delivers, analyzes geospatial data and information products, and then comes up with innovative solutions on how to solve the Army's latest geospatial challenges. As many of you know, environmental issues and water issues fall into Army challenges. And so one of our jobs here is to come up with the ways that we are going to help you wrap your arms around those requirements and really help you to understand those environmental challenges in a manageable and meaningful way. Before we talk a little bit about that, though, I'd like to set the scene a little bit with a slide that is actually adapted from a presentation I attended from AFRICOM at a recent exercise. I say that because it's really important to understand that these concerns are not just CONUS concerns, they are OCONUS concerns, and also this was a presentation that was given by a planner. These are not just concerns of engineers, these are concerns of planners and logisticians, as you will see in the presentation. In this case, planners are looking at the primary impacts of climate hazards, the secondary impacts, and the tertiary impacts. As you can imagine, this gets very complicated very quickly. Doctrine might call this a wicked problem. And so my job is to help make this a little bit more manageable and make it something that we can actually tackle and do something with on a day-to-day basis. In addition to that, we're bridge over a little bit. I also work on our water portfolio. And one of the things that I really enjoy about that is helping to give certainty around water quality, quantity, and accessibility, especially because we have so much uncertainty in so many areas. Where we can provide that certainty, it is hugely beneficial. Next slide. This slide is really just meant to be an overview of what the work looks like in general, what we're trying to do. In a nutshell, what we're trying to do here is bring together many DoD systems and many DoD users into one space in order to do collaboration and discussion and brainstorming together, and then share that information out in a technology ecosystem that works. There are two pieces to this ecosystem that we're going to talk about today. Our common operating picture, and then a geospatial analysis and reasoning tool that does multi-criteria decision analysis called GEAR. Next slide. Oops, sorry, next slide. So as I mentioned, the first thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is our common operating picture. Another thing that we learned from AFRICOM when we were attending these events is that they need a common solution space to bring in various people from all walks of life to be able to look at this technology, look at this data, look at this information, inform the decision space based on the knowledge that they have, and then pass it off to the next expert. And so it's not easy to do that. We're looking global here. This is a global problem. So how do we do it? Well, we're looking at building the technology ecosystem that allows these people from different walks of life to come in, and not just DoD. U.S. government in general and partners. How do we allow them in the technology space, and then how do we push that information so that they can make more informed decisions, ground truth the analysis that we come up with, and really push us forward? One of the key themes that we hear is 2 heads are better than 1 when it comes to environmental challenges. And so in this case, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create the technology ecosystem that allows for a 2 heads are better than 1 approach to solve these difficult challenges. Next slide. The other project that I'm going to talk a little bit about is called Geocentric Environment for Analysis and Reasoning, or GEAR. That's a lot of words, but essentially what we're talking about is it's a tool that gives you location-based information about how you might want to prioritize something. So if you have something that's important to you, maybe 3 objectives that really matter, let's put them on a map together and then see if there's an area that seems to be the area that we want to focus on. Very specifically, we're working on this with UCOM. So what you see in the slide is a very simplistic representation of the concept of what we're doing with UCOM. So in the case of UCOM, what we are doing is they generally look at airports, seaports, and large cities, for example, when it comes to thinking about doing an assessment for a transit network. Well, when we come to climate change considerations, a climate-formed assessment may need to include flooding, it may need to include climate migration, it may need to include sea level rise. Well, when we think about that, one way that we're trying to tackle this is use tools that allow us to integrate new information into existing workflows. We think we're going to have more success with that instead of asking people to do brand new work. And so the thing with GEAR is we're allowing you to take the work you already do and conduct an analysis, and then add a few more variables and see if the analysis changes. In that way, we're helping to really see whether or not climate is going to change things, or if really climate didn't make that big of a difference and we just continue with operations as normal. The last thing I'll talk a little bit about is our water portfolio. So again, this is where I was talking about there's a lot of uncertainty. Where can we add certainty? We can add certainty related to water quality, quantity, and accessibility. At the Army Geospatial Center, we are stewards of a very large water resources database. It's been around for 40 years, and it has 7.4 man-made and natural features in it. And so how do we make that information readily available and at your fingertips? How do we make it so that if you have a problem here, we can take care of it immediately instead of waiting for an expert to come in and tell you what to do or how to solve it? So that's one of the things that we're working on, whether it's through drilling with Southcom or RFIs with CENTCOM or talking to INDOPACOM. But in addition to that, as we've gotten to dig in more with our customer, there are very specific questions about water security, about water quality, and about visualizing information in a more compelling and meaningful way. And so we are also working in the next 1 to 2 years to improve that as much as we can. Next slide. So in conclusion, the Army Geospatial Center is really working to create certainty around environmental challenges through tools and technologies to the largest extent that we can. Thank you so much for your time today. If you have any questions, I'm very passionate about this work, and I would be more than happy to answer any of them. The next speaker is Dr. Martin Page. He will be talking about advanced low logistics water, or all H2O. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and it's really an honor to lead a group of researchers at ERDIC focused on operational water, which you can think of as the counterpart to operational energy. As Heather was mentioning, we have great capabilities to identify water sources in complex environments. We also have capabilities in the Army, of course, to purify that water and push it forward to sustain our soldiers. At the same time, we recognize, though, that water supply is one of the top demand signatures on the battlefield for resupply. And as we think about moving forward towards contested logistics environments with an increased focus on mobility and dispersion at large unit scales, we need to think about how we can reduce that log tail further and give our commanders options for technologies that can increase freedom of action, operational reach, and endurance. So in the sustainment community, they talk about 2 pillars of reducing demand and increasing production at point of need. With water, what that means is we're trying to use each drop of water as efficiently as possible, in some cases reusing it when it's practical to do so, and then also being able to produce water on the move or untethered from a water source. So I'm going to talk about some opportunities that are pretty technical, but before I get into that, I want to acknowledge some of our great collaborators in this effort. We don't work on this in a vacuum. We work closely with Ground Vehicle System Center in DevCom, as well as the Sustainment Seated in shaping this research portfolio. I want to echo some of the thoughts that were shared by the Secretary this morning. Not so long ago, we were thinking about coin operations, and we were thinking about contingency bases on the water side and looking at how we can reduce water transport across the wire and reduce resupply. As we're doing that research, along with the broader Army community, we found that water recycling or water reuse, specifically of gray water, can have a big impact in those types of environments, reducing demands by up to 50% in some cases. But as we think about mobile operations at BCT scale or higher, we're thinking about looking at less showering and less laundry support in those environments in our planning. And so we need to increase our focus on being able to produce water at the point of need. So I'm going to talk about the All H2O system. It's a system we're all very excited about in our laboratory. It's a system that's focused on hygiene support, and we're looking basically at these two concepts of demand reduction and increasing production at the point of need through that lens of hygiene support. It's basically a system on wheels that can provide shower and laundry support, but it also has an onboard water recycling capability that can recover 75% of the water as clean water that can go back into the shower and laundry systems. So this project was featured at Project Convergence in 2022 in November out at Fort Irwin, and we got some great feedback out there. We then took it to Fort Leonard Wood this summer, where we did some additional assessment of the system to get towards our TRL-6 milestones. So as we were working on the system, we're continuing to do research on increasing that water recovery beyond 75%. But what we're finding is that for various reasons, we're not going to ever get to 100% recovery. There's always going to be some need for either resupply or point-of-need production, no matter how hard we try on that. So the technology we've been looking to fill that gap is atmospheric water generation technology. This is technology that can take water vapor out of air and condense it as liquid water. As you can imagine, there's some challenges, but there are some commercial systems out there that are already doing this today and can work reasonably well in humid environments when you don't have a water source nearby. Our research approach has been to look at the energy requirement. It's a phase change process, so we've been focusing on how do we get the energy efficiency of this technology improved. And one option that we're looking at is to look at our tactical power generation systems, which put off a tremendous amount of waste heat. For every gallon of water or fuel that you put into a tactical power generator, about half of that comes off as waste heat. And so what we're looking to do is tap that as a resource that can power and offset the power requirements of the atmospheric water generation process. This is less mature research. We're still at about TRL-4 on this project, but we think with continued success, we're going to improve the applicability of atmospheric water generation technology to a broader range of AORs and environments and scenarios. So with that, those are two technologies that we're looking at, focused again on demand reduction and production at point of need. I'll now pass it to Dr. Brody.
All right, thanks, Martin. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Kate Brody. I'm a senior research oceanographer at ERDIC, and I also serve as the technical manager of ERDIC's Field Research Facility, which is a littoral observatory and experimentation site that's located on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So today I'm going to present to you about some of the research that ERDIC is conducting to help the Army better understand the littoral operating environment. So let's set the scene for a minute. Littoral operations have been recently recognized by the Maneuver Support and Sustainment Centers of Excellence as a potential capability gap for the Army, particularly in response to the escalation of threat levels in Indo-PACOM. And while many of us may typically think of maritime operations as maybe more of the domain of the Navy or the Marine Corps, it's really the Army that is charged with moving our troops, our equipment, our supplies across the land-water interface in order to enable early theater entry, as well as support and sustain DoD operations. Now, shallow water or littoral environments like the reefed islands or the unimproved beach landing sites of the first and second island chain present a lot of complexities for our warfighting and sustainment planners. And these are complexities that are really vastly different from the challenges faced in the desert and mountainous regions that we've been more focused on for the past 2 decades. In these environments, natural environment hazards, like some of those I've depicted on the left-hand side of this slide, play a much larger role. So what do I mean by that? Weather and dynamic underwater environments can create waves, currents, changing water depths that can really open and close operational windows in a matter of minutes to hours. And this can strand our vessels and supplies away from their intended destination. So, bottom line, the Army needs the capability to project force anywhere in the Pacific, to protect our warfighter from natural environment hazards across a multi-domain battlefield, as well as to deliver supplies to support operations across a vast and distributed operating environment. The new sustainment warfighting S&T priorities reflect these force projection needs, and they include specific requests for tools that support decision dominance, autonomous distribution, and maritime operations. And so I think with these S&T priorities, the Army is really recognizing the need to develop self-sufficient maritime planning and tactical scale capabilities in order to be able to effectively support the DoD, particularly in Indo-PACOM. So one of the ways ERDIC is trying to address these needs to solve some of these freedom of maneuver challenges in shallow water environments is to try to create decision advantage. And our goal is to be able to sense, predict, and exploit the natural environment better than our adversaries across all stages of an operation, be that strategic, operational, or tactical. We want to design and develop decision support tools that are focused on integrating remote data sources and global weather models to provide an ability to remotely plan a littoral operation without having to put boots on the ground. To complement that, we want to supplement these remote analysis tools with standoff and tactical tools, which can provide real-time assessments of environment hazards, with the ultimate goal of fusing these real-time sensor feeds with augmented realities for our vessel drivers so that they can have an improved awareness of environment hazards as they're navigating towards the beach. So one of these tools that I'd like to highlight for you is our Littoral Zone Maneuver Support tool. This is a web-based software interface that we've built that automatically derives information on coastal characteristics, including potential wave conditions, nearshore water depths, beach slopes, surf zone characteristics, all from publicly available satellite imagery and global wave and tide databases. A user can then simply launch a 5-day forecast based on global weather model predictions, and then use this forecast to inform a littoral crossing strategy. LZMST, our Littoral Zone Maneuver Support tool, is presently a TRL 7 for sandy beach environments, and one of the areas we're looking to adapt it to over the next few years is to focus on more reefed and Arctic coastlines. So another technology I wanted to highlight is our littoral imaging system. This is a standoff or tactical scale UAS that can provide seamless high-resolution topography and bathymetry merged into a single view from a flight along the coastline. These data can then be used to identify and plan routes ashore. LIS can be launched from a vessel, fly into a site, and then provide an on-the-fly assessment of surf zone conditions and that needed water depth information, and therefore enable a distributed operation. LIS is presently a TRL 7 product, and future work again is focused on taking the algorithms we've developed and trying to make it as UAS platform and sensor agnostic as possible, and then also adapting these approaches to the different environments, including reefs and Arctic coastlines. So these last two technologies I just highlighted are just two examples of technology that ERDIC is developing to support force projection and protection warfighter functions in the littorals. This slide highlights really the suite of the remote standoff and on-site sensing, numerical, and physical engineering technologies that we're working on. These are at a range of TRLs, and we think that these technologies are really poised to help enable the Army in future littoral operations. An example of one of these technologies that you see down here in the bottom right is our submat or submersible matting technology. This is a system that can be rolled out across the shoreline and help vehicles disembark from vessels and stabilize the shoreline. And this technology was recently demonstrated at Balikatan and used very successfully there. So I think future conflicts are really going to require engagement in all domains, likely against a peer or near-peer adversary. And our commanders are going to need to synchronize effects across all these domains to really open those brief multi-domain windows of operations. And I think it'd be really unfortunate to converge all those effects and then have the environmental conditions prevent a maritime operation of choice. And so our research efforts are really focused on developing the tools that will allow for MDO planning through littoral environments and really help ensure that the other available domain windows line up with Mother Nature's windows. So I think in summary, advanced sensing of the littoral battle space will be critical to ensuring maneuver and sustainment capabilities across the land-sea interface, particularly in our contested A2AD environments. Recent advances in our technology and our physics-based understanding of these environments have really positioned us to be able to achieve this dominance. But I think it's critical that we update the Army's tools and strategies to take advantage of these advances across all stages of an operation. So thank you so much with your time, and I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Major General Colleton.
That was great. How are we for time? Do we have time for a question or two? Or are we? Okay, I think we do. So if there is some spark of curiosity or interest in one of the panelists, we would be happy to take questions.
Hi, I'm Teresa Hitchens with Breaking Defense, and this is for Dr. Brody. You mentioned that you get satellite imagery from publicly available satellite imagery. I wondered if you could elaborate, like where, like from NOAA, or are you like using EU satellite? I mean, could you just elaborate a little bit on where that data comes from and how you integrate it?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, there we go. There's a number of global databases of satellite imagery, so that could be anything from the Landsat satellites to the European Space Agency Sentinel-2, and we've developed some algorithms and approaches to basically go out and grab all those images of a site of interest, do some automated analysis on those, classify the imagery, and to extract things like shoreline position, the location of breaking waves, and then process that into information about the site.
Ma'am, Lieutenant Colonel Poe, I'm the French Army. Thank you for all the panelists and for all your works, but my question is more for you, ma'am. The littoral environment is more joint. How do you share those tremendous work at the joint level with the US Navy, with the US Marine Corps, for example, for instance?
So I think the question is about sharing. Yeah, so I think all of that these researchers do, and I definitely they can speak to this as well, is sharing with our partners is very important. And so that is a big part of how we develop some of these technologies. Some of it is jointly. Obviously, some stuff we do is classified, but a lot of it's intended to be shared with our allies and partners. And we have a lot of specific examples. I know that they're working right now. I know Heather talked about in EUCOM and AFRICOM with our imagery and our products. Being able to share those is absolutely critical. That information is out there. It's just helping those partners find that information and present it in a way that they can make informed decisions from. But
I'm sorry, I've not been clear. I was talking about joint cooperation. Not really allies and partners. Sure, it's important, but at the joint level. Because littoral environment belongs to the Army, as you said, but belongs to the Navy a bit, to the Marine Corps too.
So everything we were doing too, and I think we tried to highlight this throughout the presentations, has touched every single one of our combatant commands. So jointly, we have, from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we have LNOs, liaison officers, in every one of our combatant commands. And not only LNOs by way of planner LNOs, we also have science and technology LNOs that connect what we're doing in the O-plan and COM-plan space to what we're developing in technology. And so I know every one of these platforms or technologies we discussed or areas of emphasis have some sort of relevance and have been connected to a combatant command. Anybody want to add to that? Absolutely, it's key.
I can just highlight, as you said, particularly in the littorals, we work really closely with our Marine Corps and Navy partners. So at the R&D level, we work really closely with the other research labs, with McWill, with the Naval Research Lab in developing these technologies. And then we go and take that technology to some of the joint experimentations. And so there's socialization of that technology with the joint forces. And then we can also leverage investment from the joint forces to complete technology R&D cycles. So that's one of the ways we're working with our joint partners.
I'll just add one additional note. One thing that I think might be useful to know is that at least for the climate work, we went to where AFRICOM and UCOM are located, and every representative from all of their staff sections all came and stated their requirements for what was needed in order to be able to have a climate portfolio that worked for them. In addition to that, they invited host nation partners and other allies to come and also provide feedback to us. And one of their next steps, at least for AFRICOM, is to look at that technology and then see if it's working in the joint environment, if it's something that makes sense to be shown jointly, and if it doesn't, we need to go back to the drawing board and do something else, because that's really what the intention here is.
Dr. Brody, question for you. I just sent a few of my planners out to California to take a look at the littoral sensing tool. My question is that sensing tool and the MARV and some of our other littoral sensing assets that we have feeding information into the LZMST so that we can refine that information and create a database, hopefully then limiting the amount of recons I need to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually our next step in this research right now. Those two tools that I presented sort of operate very independently, but that's exactly where we want to take it, is to be able to couple those on-site tactical tools and the data that we're collecting with those systems, and then feed it back into the remote analysis tools to be able to update the information for a site. So that's exactly where we're headed with some of this research, and we actually, I think there will be an opportunity with, on the Army side to work on that, and then we are also working with our joint partners on the Navy to help feed some of those data streams back into their tools as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hey, Todd South, Army Times. I think I'm getting this right. Mr. Josephek? I was curious, one of the other conditions besides logistics and trains with generators is their electromagnetic signature. I'm wondering, are you guys working or coordinating or collaborating with the Cyber Centers of Excellence or others to work on the electromagnetic signature of these new vehicles?
That's a great question, yes. So we do have research groups in the ERDIC that are working on cybersecurity and that. Myself, I am not one of those lead researchers, so I can't give you any technical answers on that. But yes, across our ERDIC laboratory, we do have those people who are working on those types of things. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, I think a question in the back. One question way in the back. We'll make that our last question.
Great presentation. This is for Dr. Page. If you had the capability to recycle gray water and or black water up to 95%, additionally maybe get rid of biomass on site for contingent base, is that a valuable problem for you to solve?
So that's a great question, and the question relates to what types of water we reuse, as well as what we might do with the solids that result from those processes. So on the research side, yeah, there's lots of things we could think about. I'll give some very practical answers right now. Defense Centers for Public Health, formerly Army Public Health Center, does not have policy like in TB Med 577 allowing for black water reuse. So we haven't done anything with that beyond the research level. In terms of the biomass coming from these processes and accumulation of the biomass and solids in these systems, those are active research areas. There are folks looking at opportunities for recovery of resources from some of those materials, or just destruction, thermal destruction of those types of materials. But yeah, that is part of the equation. It's a great question. Thanks.
Thanks for that question. So in closing, as you can see, the Army Corps of Engineers has some of the best minds in Army research and development, and we stand by to help address the new challenges presented by the multi-domain environment. We remain laser focused as we go forward to stay ahead of emerging threats with an eye towards innovation in a way that strengthens our Army and the Joint Force while protecting our most valuable resource, our people. So we invite everyone, anyone, if you'd like to ask more questions or come see some of the tools we use in the field, come visit us on the floor. Our ERDIC booth is located 2549, and our Army kiosk is at booth 6927. Thank you again for coming. Thank you for your questions. Essayons, be all you can be.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the Office of the Chief of Engineers presentation on overcoming challenges. At 4:10 p.m., U.S. Army Central will present People, Partnerships, and Innovation.